The rain hit the parking lot so hard it looked like the pavement was boiling, and Brooke Fielding lifted her head from a stack of intake charts because she'd heard something at the front door of Riverside Animal Clinic. A soft scratch, low and patient, like a knock made by something that had no knuckles to knock with. She stood, keys jingling at her hip, and what she saw through the glass would rearrange the rest of her life. Before we go on, tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stories like this one. The clock above the reception desk read 10:22 on a Tuesday night, and Brooke was the only living soul left in the building. Marcus had gone home hours ago. Lily had clocked out at 7. The heater ticked in the corner like a slow, dry heart. Brooke crossed the small waiting room in 3 strides, unlocked the deadbolt, and eased the door open against the wind. And the first thing that reached her was not the rain, but a smell. Wet fur, damp cardboard, something faintly medicinal, and under it all the copper trace of a body that had been running too hot for too long. The puppy lay on the welcome mat. He was barely the size of her forearm, a mottled brown and white bundle, so still she thought for a heartbeat he was already gone. His ribs made a shallow, uneven ladder under his coat. His eyes were half closed, one of them crusted at the corner. He wasn't shivering the way a healthy, cold dog shivered. He was too far gone for that. Brooke dropped to her knees on the wet cement without thinking, and it was only then, as her hand closed gently around the puppy's small chest, that she noticed she was not alone. Beyond the reach of the overhang, in the full weight of the downpour, a lean brown and white dog was sitting perfectly still. Her paws were placed neatly together. Her tail lay against the concrete. She had lowered her ears against the storm, but her eyes, a strange, clear amber, almost gold under the porch light, did not blink. She was not looking at the door. She was looking at Brooke. And there was something in that look, something so patient and so precise that Brooke felt her throat close. The mother dog had carried him here. She had walked up the ramp, laid him down on the mat, backed off into the rain, and then she had waited. She had chosen this door. She had chosen Brooke, even though she couldn't have known who Brooke was, only that this was the place where the lights were still on and where a person moved behind the glass. "Hey there, Mama," Brooke said, and her voice came out low and thin, and she didn't recognize it. She stayed crouched. She did not reach for the mother. She scooped the puppy into her jacket, cradling him against her chest, and she stood slowly, and she glanced back over her shoulder as she moved toward the door. The mother dog didn't rise. She settled her chin an inch lower, as if she'd already known Brooke would go inside, and had made her peace with waiting through the whole night if she had to. Under the exam room lamp, the situation turned serious fast. The puppy was a male, and Brooke put him around 6 weeks. She laid him on the warm towel and worked with the calm hands of someone whose body knew what to do before her brain caught up. Temperature 94 degrees. Gums the color of old paper. A capillary refill that stretched out to 3 and then 4 seconds. His belly was distended, tight as a drum on the right side, and when she pressed carefully, she felt a hard little something under her fingers where nothing hard should have been. Her first fear was parvo. Every vet who worked with strays learned to smell it before they saw it, and the little exam room in the back of Riverside had been through outbreaks before. She ran the snap test with hands that did not tremble and waited the 8 minutes. Negative. Not parvo. She drew blood for a quick panel and ran it herself in the small lab in the back. What came up on the screen made her sit down for a second and put her fingers against her temples. The white cell count was up, but not sky high. The electrolytes were beginning to slide. What was killing him wasn't a virus. It was something he had swallowed, something small enough to get past his throat and past his stomach, but big enough or sharp enough to hang up just below the pylorus and shut him down from the inside. Brooke had seen it before. 9 times out of 10 by the time a puppy this size showed up in her clinic with a blockage he'd been suffering for a full day. and by then you were operating on a body that had already begun to eat itself. This puppy hadn't been sick that long. She could tell by his kidney values, maybe 6 hours, maybe 7, and that meant if she moved right now, she had a window. She walked to the front window between checks. The mother dog had not moved. She sat in the rain, with her head just a fraction lower than it had been 10 minutes before, and her gaze had not left the glass. Brooke could see her chest rising and falling with the effort of holding still. She was thin, thinner than Brooke had realized in the porch light. The ribs pushed against the coat when she breathed, and one of her front paws was tucked slightly under her body in a way that suggested it hurt to bear weight on it. Brooke picked up the phone in the exam room and dialed Marcus Webb's cell. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, which was a terse recording of his voice saying, "Leave a message and he'd get back to you when he could." She left one. Then she called it again, because Marcus sometimes silenced his phone when he was watching a game, and she wanted him to see 2 missed calls. Voicemail again. She called Lily Chen. Lily picked up on the 3rd ring, and Brooke could hear the sound of a truck engine in the background and a slow, defeated exhale. "Dr. Fielding, I was about to call you," Lily said. "I've got a flat on the interstate. Roadside is coming, but it's going to be at least half an hour before I can get moving." Brooke told her about the puppy. Lily's silence lasted a beat too long. "I can make it in 30, Lily said. "Maybe 35. Brooke leaned her forehead against the wall. Half an hour was a lifetime for an animal this small, with an obstruction this old, and she did the math in her head. The honest math, not the math you told a client because you didn't want to scare them. 35 minutes to Lily's arrival, then another 20 for setup, then the surgery itself, which was already going to be delicate on a body this size. She had, at most, an hour before this puppy's numbers slid past the point where anesthesia became more of a killer than the blockage. "Come as fast as you can," she said, "but drive safe. I'll start." There was a policy at Riverside, and Marcus Webb had written it into their operating agreement 3 years ago after a bad night with a laparotomy that had ended in a lawsuit. No solo overnight surgery. 2 licensed hands, or you called the emergency clinic 35 miles east in Fairfax, and you shipped the animal there and let them handle it. It was a good policy. It had kept them out of court, and it had kept the insurance company off their backs. It was also a policy that assumed the animal in question had the luxury of a 35-minute drive on top of everything else it was already surviving. Brooke stood in the exam room with the puppy's warm, faintly quivering body in her palms, and she made a decision she did not speak aloud. She scrubbed in. The surgery took an hour and 40 minutes. She induced with a fraction of the anesthesia she would have used on an adult, moving in the tiny doses a 6-week-old body could tolerate. She made her incision small, just enough to slip in with the field she needed. She traced the small, pink loop of intestine until she found the swelling, and when she opened the tract, she saw the object clean and full for the first time. It was a wire twist tie, the kind that came around the neck of a bread bag, and someone had cut it with scissors so that the ends were sharp and angled, and one of those ends had caught in the puppy's gut wall and started to abrade the tissue. She removed the twist tie. She closed in 2 layers. She flushed the abdomen with warm saline that she had heated in the microwave in the break room, because the little stainless bowls that were meant for warming were on the wrong shelf, and she couldn't leave the field to fetch them. She sutured. She counted her instruments twice. Her hands did not shake. She had been doing this for 11 years, and the rhythm of her own breath was the metronome she trusted more than any monitor. When she carried the puppy out of surgery, breathing steadily on his own, tiny chest rising and falling under the heat lamp, she did not go straight to the recovery pen. She walked out through the reception area to the front door, and she pressed her palm flat against the glass, and she looked into the parking lot. The mother dog was still there. Brooke opened the door and called softly. Not a name, because she didn't have one for her yet. Just a sound, a low "come here" that any dog anywhere would recognize as an invitation. The mother rose to her feet, one paw held delicately off the ground, and she hesitated. And then she walked forward through the sheet of rain and up the ramp and stepped over the threshold on her own. She was smaller than Brooke had thought. Her coat was matted at the shoulders, her pads were cracked, and one of them was bleeding a thin line onto the linoleum. Around her neck was a faded blue nylon collar with no tag on it, and the D-ring where a tag would have hung was polished bright, as though something had been attached and then had come off a long time ago. She did not stop to sniff the floor. She did not raise her head for a scratch. She walked past Brooke, straight through the reception area and into the back, and she went directly to the recovery pen where the puppy was sleeping under the lamp, and she lowered herself onto the tile floor along the wire mesh, and she pressed her nose through the gap so that she could just barely brush the top of her puppy's head with her breath. Brooke sat down on the floor with her back against the wall, and she cried, not the neat professional tears of a woman who had done a hard thing well. The other kind. The kind that came from someplace deeper, from watching an animal with nothing in the world do the smartest thing that could have been done and choose the one right door in the middle of a storm. She cried because someone, somewhere, had once taught this dog to trust that a lit window meant help. And she cried because whoever had done that teaching wasn't there anymore. And this dog had been carrying that lesson alone through the rain, long enough to find one more person she could hand her baby to. That was how she was still sitting on the floor 20 minutes later, when Marcus Webb finally got her missed calls and walked in through the front door. Marcus Webb was 54 years old and had been Brooke's partner at Riverside for 9 of those years, and Brooke had once described him privately to her sister as the most reliable, frustrating man she had ever worked with. He was tall and grey-templed and prone to speaking in flat statements that other people mistook for anger. His shoes squeaked on the tile as he came into the back, and he stopped in the doorway of the recovery room and took in the scene: the puppy under the lamp, the mother pressed against the mesh, Brooke on the floor, and he did not say anything for a long time. "You operated," he said at last, and his voice was low and quiet, which for Marcus was worse than a raised voice. Brooke wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "I did. Alone. I called you twice. Then I called Lily. She had a flat. You could have shipped him. He wouldn't have made it. Marcus, his kidney values were already going. 35 minutes at 70 miles an hour with no support in the truck. He'd have arrested on the way." Marcus was silent. He walked over to the puppy, bent low, and touched 2 fingers against the little pink pad of a foot. He watched the chest for a full 10 seconds. Then he straightened up and looked at Brooke. "He looks stable," he said. "He is. That's not what I'm mad about, Brooke. I know." He crouched down beside her, which was the closest thing to a hug Marcus was capable of offering. His knees popped, and he let out a small, uncharacteristic sound. She could smell coffee on him. "You know what happens if this goes wrong and someone finds out," he said. "You lose your license. Not warned, not fined, lost." "I know." "Then don't do it again. Not for a stray, not for anything. If I don't get to you, you get in the car, and you drive that animal to Fairfax, and you let them deal with it. You promise me." "I promise you," she said. She meant it, but she wasn't sorry. Marcus stood up with a grunt, and only then did he really look at the mother dog. She had not moved when he entered. Her nose was still pressed through the mesh. Her eyes flicked up to him and then back to her puppy, and there was a small, unmistakable exhale that Brooke recognized as the sound of a dog dismissing a person as harmless. "Now, who is this?" Marcus asked. "She brought him." "She what?" "She brought him," Brooke said. "To the door. She laid him down and stepped back. She sat in the rain and waited until I finished. Then she walked in on her own when I opened the door." Marcus looked at the mother for a long time. He was not a man given to sentiment, and Brooke had watched him talk a family through the euthanasia of their 15-year-old golden retriever with the composure of a person reading a weather report. She had never seen him wear the expression he was wearing now. He shook his head once, slowly, as if to clear it. "That's a working dog," he said. "What? Look at how she's holding her body. Look at how she came in. She waited to be called. She went straight where she needed to go and put herself down. That's not a stray, Brooke. That's a dog who's had a job." Brooke got up off the floor. She approached the mother slowly. She let her sniff her hand, and then she ran her fingers gently along the collar, feeling for anything embossed or engraved. There was a raised patch on the underside where the D-ring had rubbed, and when she turned it toward the light, she could make out 3 digits that had once been embossed and were now nearly worn away. 282. The rest was gone. Marcus scanned her for a microchip with the wand from the front counter. Nothing. He tried 3 times, moving the wand slowly from shoulder to hip. No signal. He straightened up with a small, thoughtful frown, the frown of a man who had encountered a problem that didn't fit the shape of the box it should have fit in. "She had a chip once," he said. "That kind of collar goes with that kind of dog. Somebody spent money on her. Somebody trained her. But she's been out a while." "How long is a while? Look at the pads. Look at the coat. 6 weeks, maybe 8. Long enough to whelp a litter somewhere, and not long enough to lose all the muscle memory of being a house dog." Brooke thought about the puppy on her operating table. 6 weeks old, give or take. The math clicked into place with a small, cold click that made her set her jaw. The mother had been pregnant when she got out, or she had gotten out with pups already born. Either way, she had spent the first 6 weeks of her puppy's life keeping him alive by herself, in whatever kind of weather this part of Ohio threw at her. And tonight, when the puppy's belly had swollen and his gums had gone gray, she had gotten up out of wherever she was sleeping, and she had walked him to the only place she knew how to find. "Where were you?" Brooke murmured, more to herself than to the dog. "Before all this." The mother looked at her, and her eyes said nothing, but she did not look away. Brooke named her Sandy that night, after Sanderson Road, the 2-lane strip of asphalt that ran along the front of the clinic parking lot. It was a plain name, and Sandy did not respond to it, but she did not object to it either. And by the time Marcus went home a little after midnight, Sandy had eaten a small bowl of moist food and was drinking careful sips of water from a bowl Brooke had put down inside the recovery pen. The puppy, whom Brooke had begun calling Reed for no better reason than because that was the name of the street that crossed Sanderson 2 blocks north, was still sleeping. His temperature had climbed a full degree. His breathing was even. He was going to make it. Brooke slept on the cot in the break room for 3 hours and woke up when a small, precise sound reached her. The tap of nails on tile, 3 steps, then a pause, then 3 more. Sandy had gotten up in the pen. Brooke found her standing over Reed, licking one of his ears very slowly, and there was a look on her face, if a dog could be said to have a look. That was the closest thing to peace Brooke had ever seen on a stranger. Lily Chen arrived at 7:30 in the morning with 2 cups of coffee and a face full of apologies. She stopped in the doorway of the recovery room, saw Sandy inside the pen with Reed, and dropped one of the coffee cups on the floor. "Oh my God," she said. "Oh my God, Brooke. I know. He's stable. He's going to be sore for a week, but he's going to be fine." Lily stepped forward carefully, and Sandy watched her the way she had watched Brooke through the glass the night before, unblinking and calm and unafraid. Lily crouched by the pen and offered the back of her hand slowly, and Sandy sniffed it once and then went back to grooming Reed's ear. "Where did she come from?" Lily whispered. "I don't know." "How did she know to come here?" "I don't know." "Brooke, that's not something a dog just does." "I know it isn't." Lily rocked back on her heels. "I've got a friend at Animal Control. Do you want me to run her description through their found reports?" "Yeah, do that." And check with the shelter in Franklin and Fairfax. And Marcus wants to post flyers in a 2-mile radius. Somebody, somewhere, is looking for her. Lily nodded. She stood up and began pulling out her phone, and then she paused with her thumb hovering over the screen. "Brooke," she said, "what if no one is?" That was the first crack in the wall of what Brooke thought she knew about this story. She had assumed, without meaning to assume it, that Sandy had a family who had loved her and lost her, and that the family would show up within a day or two, tearful and grateful, and that Brooke would hand the mother and the puppy back to them. And that would be that. She had not, in any conscious way, allowed the possibility that Sandy had come from somewhere no one wanted her back from. She looked at Lily. She looked at the mother in the pen, and she felt low in her stomach the first flutter of a suspicion that this was going to be a longer story than she had budgeted for. Lily posted the description on 3 lost and found pages, called the 2 shelters, and sent a photo of the collar to her friend at County Animal Control. Marcus put flyers up at every gas station within 2 miles, at the 2 grocery stores that would let him tape a sheet to their community boards, and at the coffee shop on the corner where the after-church crowd gathered on Sundays. The flyer had a photo of Sandy taken on the exam table that morning, her ears back but not afraid, her amber eyes looking directly into the camera. Under the photo, Marcus had typed, in plain block letters, "This dog and her puppy were left at our clinic Tuesday night in the storm. If you know her, please call." By that Thursday, there had been 11 calls to the front desk. 9 of them were from people who had seen the flyer and wanted to know if the puppy was okay. 1 was from a woman in her 70s who thought Sandy looked like a dog her neighbor had adopted from a rescue in Kentucky, but she was mistaken. The neighbor's dog turned up on video call, and it was a female with a different white blaze on the chest. The 11th call came in on Thursday afternoon, and it was the one that changed the direction of Brooke's week. The caller was a woman named Denise Halloran. She lived, she said, in a small house on the north end of Ashbury, which was the little town 12 miles east of Riverside. She had lost her dog 5 months before, she said, on a camping trip up at Buckeye Lake. Her voice on the phone had the fragile brightness of a person who had gotten used to hoping for something and being wrong about it. She had seen the flyer on the community board at the Ashbury post office. She hadn't come running when she saw the photo, she said, because she had come running twice before to sightings that turned out to be somebody else's dog, and she couldn't do it again if it wasn't hers. She wanted to know one thing. Did Sandy have a small notch, no bigger than the edge of a fingernail, missing from the outside edge of her left ear? Brooke walked to the pen. She lifted Sandy's left ear gently with 2 fingers, and Sandy tilted her head to the side to make it easier. Along the outer edge of the ear, so old and healed over that it looked like part of the shape of the ear itself, was a small notched divot the size of a fingernail edge. "Yes," Brooke said into the phone. Denise Halloran did not make a sound for so long that Brooke thought the line had dropped. Then Denise said, very quietly, that she was going to get in her car and drive to Riverside right now. And would that be all right? And Brooke said yes. Marcus was in the back room when Brooke told him what had happened, and he set down the file he was holding and stared at the corner of his desk for a good 10 seconds before he answered. "That's fast," he said. "Marcus, she knew about the ear." "I know, I heard you. That's why I'm saying it's fast. This is a woman who is not going to walk in and say she's not sure. This is a woman who's going to walk in and say hello, sweetheart. And Sandy is going to come to her. Or she isn't." "Or she isn't," Brooke repeated. Marcus looked at her for a beat. "Brooke," he said, "you already love that dog." She did not answer. Denise Halloran drove up to the clinic at just after 4 in the afternoon in a small blue sedan that had a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. She was in her late 40s, thin, with graying hair pulled back at the nape of her neck, and she was wearing a lightweight coat that was several years too old for the weather. She came into the reception area holding a folded piece of paper in her hand, and she did not speak. She only looked at Brooke and made a small, helpless gesture with the paper, and Brooke walked out from behind the counter and led her to the back. Sandy was in the pen with Reed. When Brooke opened the door to the recovery room, Sandy raised her head, and her ears rotated a quarter turn forward at the sound of new footsteps, and she looked past Brooke, and her whole body went briefly, deeply still. "Oh," Denise said, and it was the smallest sound that a person could make. Sandy stood up. She stepped delicately over Reed so as not to disturb him. She walked to the front of the pen. She pushed her nose against the mesh, and she made a sound, not a bark, not a whine, but a low, throaty note that Brooke had never heard a dog make. It was the sound of an old private word being spoken between two people. Denise dropped to her knees. She reached her fingers through the mesh, and Sandy licked them once, gently, and then pressed her forehead against the wire, and the two of them stayed like that for a full minute, without speaking. When Denise finally looked up, there were tears running down her face, but her mouth was set in a hard, complicated line, and Brooke felt something drop through her chest. "Her name is Molly," Denise said. "She was my daughter's." Brooke sat down in the chair across from her. She waited. She had learned that when people started to tell a story with a shape like this, the best thing you could do was be quiet and listen. Denise's daughter, Emily, had adopted Molly as a puppy from a therapy dog training program in southern Ohio when Emily was 22. Molly hadn't made it through the final placement. She'd washed out because she was too sensitive to loud noises to work in a hospital environment, but she had come home with Emily, and Emily had lived with her mother, and Molly had been the sun and the moon and the stars in that little house on the north end of Ashbury for 4 years. Then Emily had died. She had been walking home from her shift at a diner one night, and a driver had come around a corner too fast on a wet road, and Emily had not made it to the sidewalk in time. She was 26. After the funeral, Denise had tried to keep Molly, but grief is a hard house to be in, with an animal that reminds you of the person who is gone. And after 8 months, Denise had made the decision to bring Molly on a camping trip up at Buckeye Lake, and let her run one afternoon along the shoreline, and Molly had come to the tent that night, and eaten and slept as usual. And then, in the morning, Molly had been gone. Just gone. Denise had looked. She had put up flyers. She had called every shelter in 3 counties. She had never found her. "I lied to myself," Denise said. "I told myself she'd run off, that she'd just been happier out there, but I know now. She's been on the road ever since." Brooke's mouth was dry. "And the pups? There was a golden that hung around our neighborhood before we lost her. A big male, not fixed. He was gone by the time she left with me." Denise closed her eyes. "So she was already carrying them when I lost her. Oh, God. She was carrying them, and I put her in the car and took her to a lake." Brooke didn't say the thing she was thinking, which was that Sandy had walked from Buckeye Lake to the front door of Riverside Animal Clinic. That was a distance of 31 miles over the course of 5 months, with puppies and with a bad front paw, and no one who fed her. She just sat there, and she watched Denise wipe her face with the sleeve of her coat, and she waited for the part that Denise had not said yet. "Dr. Fielding," Denise said, "I can't take her back." There it was. "I can't," Denise repeated, and her voice was hoarse. "I can't afford a puppy. I lost my job at the school in March. I've been substitute teaching. I have a bad back. I can't lift a big dog into a car when I have to take her to the vet. And every time I look at her, I'm going to see my daughter. And I don't think that's fair. Not to her, not to me." "Denise," Brooke said, "please don't apologize." "I do apologize, I do. Because she came here and she trusted this door, and she brought her baby to a stranger to save because she couldn't do it herself. I don't get to take that away from her by driving her back to a house full of sadness." "You don't have to. Dr. Fielding, I want her to be safe." She'll be safe, I promise you. Denise reached into her coat and pulled out the folded piece of paper. It was a photograph, old and slightly creased. A young woman, laughing on a couch with a slightly younger version of Sandy, Molly, sprawled across her lap. Denise put the photograph on the counter and pushed it toward Brooke. "Keep it," she said, "for whoever gets her next, so they know she was loved." Brooke took the photograph. She put it in a folder in her desk drawer. She walked Denise back out to the little blue sedan, and she watched her drive away. Marcus was waiting for her by the door when she came back inside. "Well," he said. The mother's name was Molly. She belonged to a woman whose daughter died. The daughter died. Then the mother lost her at a lake 5 months ago. She was already pregnant when she got out. Denise can't take her back. Marcus let out a slow breath. 30 miles, he said. Something like that. That dog walked 30 miles with pups, Brooke. I know. And she just kept the one that got sick. Yeah. He rubbed his jaw. Where are the others? That question landed on both of them at the same time. Sandy had had a litter. Denise had confirmed it. The likelihood that Reed was the only surviving pup was real, but it was not certain. And by that evening, Brooke and Marcus and Lily had made a rough map of every place a dog might realistically have holed up between Buckeye Lake and Riverside. Lily reached out to her contacts at Animal Control. Marcus called 2 of his neighbors, who worked as long-haul truckers and drove the back roads of the county at all hours. Brooke called a friend who ran a small rescue in the county south of theirs. By the end of Friday, 4 sightings of a brown and white female dog with pups had been reported in a stretch of woods along a creek about 7 miles east of the clinic. All 4 sightings were older than a week. All 4 were near an abandoned shed that used to belong to a hunting camp. They went at first light on Saturday. Marcus drove. Brooke rode in the passenger seat. Lily sat in the back with a carrier on her lap. Sandy was at home in the recovery pen with Reed because Brooke had not been willing to let her come along in case what they found was bad. The shed was falling in on itself. The roof had a hole in the north corner, and there was an old army green tarp draped over the ground on one side that Sandy had clearly dragged there. Underneath the tarp, there was a nest of shredded newspaper and dried grass, and in the middle of the nest, curled together in a knot the size of a soccer ball, were 2 puppies. One brown and white male, one white with a pink nose, both alive, both thin. Both, from the look of it, at least 8 days without food, but with plenty of standing water from the creek to lick. Lily made a small choked sound and knelt down and started opening the carrier. Marcus stayed back a step to let her work. Brooke crouched in the entrance of the shed, and she could smell what 6 weeks of pups did to a small enclosed space, and she could smell also that Sandy had kept it as clean as she could, dragging her pup's waist to a corner and burying it in dirt, the way a mother dog will do when she's trying to hide her nest from something with a nose. They were waiting for her to come back, Lily whispered. They were, Brooke said. Brooke, she left them here to bring us the sick one. I know. The 2 other puppies. Brooke would later name them June and Piper after 2 more streets in the neighborhood, rode home in the carrier on Lily's lap, quiet and stunned and not sure of the world. When they arrived at the clinic and Brooke carried them into the recovery room, Sandy stood up in her pen with the same still, listening posture she had held at the door on Tuesday night. Her ears rotated forward, her head tilted. She made the same low, throaty note she had made for Denise the day before. Brooke opened the door to the pen and set the 2 puppies down. Sandy sniffed them once, from head to tail. She licked June's face. She licked Piper's ear. And then she lay down, very slowly, with Reed and the 2 returning pups against her side, and she closed her eyes for what looked like the first real sleep she had taken in 5 months. Brooke went into the bathroom and cried again, because that was the 2nd day in a row this dog had made her cry, and she was not a woman who cried easily. They kept the news of the other 2 puppies quiet at first. Marcus said it was because they were still deciding what to do about placement. Brooke suspected the truth was that all three of them were, in various small ways, considering keeping one. Lily had already picked up June and pressed her nose to the puppy's forehead and murmured, "Hello, hello, hello." Marcus, who had famously never owned a dog since his wife had died 4 years before, was standing an unusual amount of time near the pen. Brooke herself had begun to think of Reed less as the puppy she saved, and more as Reed, a small, stubborn creature who had opinions about the way she held him. On Sunday afternoon, a man came into the clinic. He was tall and blocky through the shoulders, in a faded green work jacket and jeans that were clean but old. He had a folded piece of paper in his hand, a printout Brooke saw of the flyer Marcus had put up at the coffee shop, and he came up to the front desk and put the flyer down on the counter and tapped the photograph twice. "That's my dog," he said. Brooke looked at him. She was at the desk because Lily had gone out to grab lunch and Marcus was in the back with a client. The reception area was empty otherwise. The man had a broad, flat face, and his eyes were the pale, tired blue of a person who had spent most of his life outside. He didn't look angry. He didn't look glad. He looked, more than anything, like a man who was trying to complete an errand. "Sir, I need to ask you some questions," Brooke said, keeping her voice even. "Ask them." "When did you lose her?" "Winter. Late winter." "Where?" "On my property out east of Ashbury. I raise pups. I sell them to good families. She got out of the run one night and I never saw her again." "You raise dogs?" "Yes, ma'am." "What's her name?" He hesitated for the smallest of fractions of a second. "Belle," he said. "I called her Belle." Brooke's spine went cold. She had watched Sandy the day before in the pen, when Denise Halloran had said the word Molly softly through the mesh. She had watched Sandy's whole body go still with a kind of recognition that could not be faked. "Belle," she thought. He calls her Belle. "Sir, would you mind if I took your name and a phone number and had my partner give you a call?" "I'd like to see her." "Not today. Not without paperwork. We have to be careful." His mouth tightened. "I've got paperwork. I've got her registration papers in the truck. Then leave a copy with me and my partner will call you back today." He looked at her for a long, level moment. Then he went out to his truck and came back with an envelope, and he laid it on the counter and he said, "I'll come back at close of business tomorrow. That gives you time to make a decision." He left. Brooke waited until she saw his truck pull out onto the road before she opened the envelope with the tips of her fingers as if it might bite. Inside were 2 things. A registration paper from a kennel club that Brooke had never heard of, listing the dog's name as Belle and giving a birth date that would make her 7 years old. A photograph, printed on regular paper, of Sandy sitting in front of a chain-link enclosure with a rope collar around her neck. The angle of the photograph was strange. The lighting was wrong for the time of year on the paperwork. But it was Sandy. There was no denying it. Brooke walked to the back and put the envelope on Marcus's desk. "Marcus," she said, "we have a problem." Marcus read the paperwork. He looked at the photograph. He put the paperwork down and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Then he did something Brooke had never seen him do. He swore, quietly, precisely. And then he picked up the phone and called someone. Brooke didn't catch the name. He hung up. He looked at her. "Brooke," he said, "his name is Elliot Corwin. He's got a place off Baker Road. He's been in some trouble with animal control. Not enough to shut him down. Enough that they know his name. He's a breeder. He calls himself one. What he is a man who lets his dogs whelp and sells the pups on Craigslist and doesn't do a lot of the health work in between. He's not a bad man in the way you're thinking. He's a not careful man. There's a difference. But it matters, and it matters for Sandy. So he owns her." Marcus tapped the paperwork. "This is not proof of ownership. It's a kennel club registration. It says he registered a dog. It doesn't say she's still his. Denise Halloran had a dog she called Molly, and that dog was chipped once and rehomed and possibly adopted through a therapy program before that, and any of those steps could be the actual chain of title. But this man is going to walk in tomorrow with paperwork, and if we don't have something better, he's going to be able to make trouble for us. What kind of trouble? The kind that goes to court. The kind that gets you and me on the wrong side of an ownership hearing. Brooke, this state's law on lost and found animals is not friendly to good Samaritans. Brooke sat down hard. He wants her back for what? She said. You said the pads on her paws were cracked. You said she's underweight. She's had a litter of 5 somewhere and lost 2 of them. He wants her back so she can have another litter. Marcus nodded once. That's what it looks like. Brooke thought about the puppy under the heat lamp. She thought about Sandy sitting in the rain. She thought about Denise Halloran's face in the reception area, saying, I want her to be safe. He is not taking her, she said. I know, Marcus said, but we're going to have to be smart. Marcus called a lawyer he knew, a woman named Ana Delgado, who had done work for the County Humane Society for 20 years, and Ana came to the clinic that Sunday evening and sat down at the kitchen table in the break room with a legal pad and a coffee mug and started asking questions. She wanted to know when Sandy had arrived. She wanted photographs of the collar and the healed notch in the ear. She wanted Denise Halloran's contact information. She wanted the therapy program's name. 2 things are going to matter, Ana said. First, whether we can establish that this dog was rehomed to Denise's daughter Emily through a legitimate transfer. If Corwin sold her or gave her to that therapy program, then he doesn't own her anymore. Second, whether he abandoned her. Under Ohio law, if an animal has been out of the possession of its registered owner for a certain period of time without a search, the registered owner's claim weakens. He said he lost her in late winter. That's about 10 months ago. He didn't file a lost report. He didn't call animal control. He put up no flyers. If we can show that, we can argue abandonment. How do we show that? We ask him. We record him, and then we go to court if we have to. Marcus said, Ana, if it goes to court, does he get her while we wait? Ana Delgado looked at Marcus, then at Brooke, then at the door of the recovery room, where they could see Sandy through the glass with the 3 puppies against her belly. If it goes to court, she said, we file for emergency custody on the grounds that she needs veterinary supervision. She's your patient. You saved her puppy's life. She has cracked pads and mild dehydration and a healing paw. That's a medical hold. That'll keep her here until we have a hearing. How long until a hearing? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Then let's do that. Elliot Corwin came back on Monday at 5 in the afternoon, exactly as he had said he would. Brooke was standing at the reception desk with Ana Delgado, who was wearing a dark blazer and holding a folder against her chest. Marcus was in the back. Lily was in the recovery room with Sandy and the pups, and she had been given very clear instructions not to bring them out for any reason. You called the lawyer, Corwin said, looking at Ana. Mr. Corwin, Ana said, I'm Ana Delgado. I represent Riverside Animal Clinic in this matter. We'd like to talk with you about your claim on this dog. There's nothing to talk about. I gave the paperwork. Sir, we've reviewed the paperwork. We have a few questions. What questions? When did you last see this dog? Late winter, February maybe. Did you file a lost animal report with County Animal Control? He hesitated. No. Did you contact any local shelters? No. Did you post flyers? No. Sir, when was the last time you had this dog seen by a licensed veterinarian? He didn't answer. Sir, I don't know. You don't know? I don't take my dogs to vets much. I know what I'm doing. I've been raising dogs for 30 years. Ana let a small silence sit in the reception area. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She let him hear his own answer echo in the space. "Mr. Corwin," she said, "we are placing a medical hold on this animal on the recommendation of Dr. Fielding, who is her attending veterinarian. During the period of that hold, we will be filing for a hearing on the matter of ownership. At the hearing, we will be presenting evidence of abandonment, evidence of prior transfer to a third party, and evidence of neglect. If you would like to withdraw your claim now, we can end this quietly." "You're saying I abandoned her?" "I'm saying she was out of your possession for approximately 10 months, and you did not file a report." "I looked for her." "Where?" "On my property, in the woods." "For how long?" "I don't know. A while." "Mr. Corwin, I have to be direct with you. If we go to a hearing and the court finds that you did not exercise reasonable effort to recover a lost animal, you can be assessed penalties. If there is any evidence of neglect predating her disappearance, additional charges are possible. It is my professional recommendation that you consult with an attorney before you decide how to proceed." He looked at Ana Delgado for a long time. Then he looked at Brooke, and Brooke saw for the first time something that was not just tiredness in his face. It was calculation. He was doing math in his head, and Brooke watched him arrive at a number that he didn't like. "You can keep her," he said. Brooke's breath left her body all at once. "I want the papers signed," Ana said calmly. "Today." "Fine. I have them here." He signed. He did it standing at the counter, with a pen Ana handed him, and he did not read the paper before he put his name on it. When he was done, he pushed the paper back across the counter, and he looked at Brooke. "You take care of her," he said. It came out flat. Brooke did not know if it was a threat or a farewell. "I will," she said. He walked out. His truck pulled onto Sanderson Road and disappeared into the dusk, and Ana Delgado let out the smallest possible sigh, and she said, "That was easier than I thought it was going to be." He knew he was on thin ice. "How thin?" "Very. If he'd gone to a hearing, he'd have walked out with fines, and possibly with the loss of his kennel license. He knew that. He came in to bluff. He didn't know we'd have a lawyer here on a Monday." "Thank you, Ana. Don't thank me. Buy me dinner at Antonelli's." Marcus came out from the back and let out a long, slow breath. Lily came out from the recovery room with a very carefully controlled expression that lasted until she was 2 steps from Brooke, at which point it dissolved into a grin, and she grabbed Brooke in a hug that lifted Brooke off the floor. "He didn't take her," Lily said. "He didn't take her. He didn't take her." "He didn't take her," Brooke agreed. That was Monday evening. On Tuesday morning, everything got harder. Reed, who had been recovering beautifully, refused his breakfast. He turned his head away from the small bowl of moist puppy food Brooke offered him, and his ears drooped. And when Brooke picked him up, his belly was warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been. She took his temperature, 104.2. She listened to his lungs. She palpated his abdomen carefully. There was tenderness where there had been no tenderness the day before. "Marcus," she said, "he's septic." Marcus came in and confirmed her read within 30 seconds. The blood panel came back an hour later. Reed had developed an infection along the suture line, and it had begun to seed the surrounding tissue, and if they did not go back in within the next 12 hours to clean the site and revise the closure, they were going to lose him. Brooke prepped for the second surgery, with her hands trembling for the first time in 11 years. It was not the surgery itself that scared her. It was the idea of losing him now, of failing at the second turn what she had won at the first. Marcus watched her at the scrub sink and put his hand between her shoulder blades for 1 second, the way a coach might, and said, "You've got this." She did have it. She opened the site cleanly. She debrided the affected tissue. She flushed the cavity with antibiotics. She closed with a different suture pattern and put in a drain. She was in and out in 55 minutes. When she carried Reed back to the pen, Sandy stood up and made her low, throaty note, and Reed, still groggy, lifted his head an inch off the towel and looked at his mother. And Sandy leaned in and pressed her nose against the top of his head, and Brooke turned around and walked out of the room because she could not watch that anymore without falling apart. Reed's fever broke by the following morning. His appetite came back by that afternoon. On Wednesday evening, he stood up on all four wobbly legs and took 3 steps across the pen to reach his mother's water bowl, and then sat down heavily with the satisfaction of an animal who had done something hard. The clinic settled for a few days into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Sandy. Brooke had stopped correcting herself when she thought of her that way, was tolerating the antibiotic ointment on her cracked pads. Her weight was coming up on the good food. She had let Marcus draw a full blood panel on Thursday, and it had come back cleaner than any of them had a right to expect for a dog who had walked 30 miles in the winter. June and Piper had gotten their first round of shots. Reed was on the mend. On Friday afternoon, an unfamiliar car pulled into the parking lot. It was a burgundy minivan, older but well kept, with a dent in the front bumper. Out of it climbed a man and a woman, both in their mid-40s, and behind them 2 children, a boy of maybe 10 and a girl of maybe 8. They all held hands in a strange, careful little chain. The father, a tall man in a plaid shirt, held a folded piece of paper. Marcus was at the front desk when they came in. Brooke was in the back, catching up on charts. She heard the little bell over the door and glanced up out of habit and saw the family standing just inside the entryway, and something about their posture stopped her hand on the pen. "Can I help you?" Marcus said. "Aye," the father said. His voice was pleasant, a little hoarse. "We saw a flyer up at the diner on Route 12, 2 miles from us, I think. It said there was a dog and a puppy." He held the flyer up. It was the one Marcus had put up almost 2 weeks ago at the little diner Brooke had never been to. "Oh," Marcus said. "Yes, come on in." The family stepped forward. The little girl, who had a chip in her front tooth and a scab on her elbow, looked up at Marcus with the enormous focus of a child who had been coached on how to behave in a serious situation. The boy was holding a small stuffed dog under his arm, as if he had forgotten he was holding it. "Doctor," the father said, "can we ask about the dog?" "Sure. What can I tell you?" "How old is she?" "Best guess, 5 or 6 years. Is she good with kids?" Marcus paused. He looked at the little girl and then at the boy, and then at the 2 adults, and then at the room around them, and Brooke could see him weighing something. "You'd have to meet her," he said. "Let me get my colleague." He came to the back. He stood in the doorway. "Brooke," he said, "come look at this." Brooke came out to the front. She recognized the family the way you recognize weather. She had never seen them before, but every part of her body registered that this was the family. The father's hand on his wife's back, the boy's grip on the stuffed dog. The girl's chin tilted up. "Hi," she said, walking around the counter. "I'm Brooke Fielding. I'm the vet who took care of them. Would you like to meet her?" The father nodded. The wife wiped her eyes even though she wasn't yet crying. The children just watched. Brooke opened the door to the recovery room and led them in slowly. Sandy was lying on her side with Reed against her belly, and June and Piper piled on top of Reed, one paw draped over the other pup's neck. Her eyes were half closed. When the family stopped in the middle of the room, she opened them and turned her head, and her amber gaze moved from face to face, the mother first, then the father, then the girl, then the boy, and then, without lifting her head off the tile, she thumped her tail against the floor once. It was the first time Brooke had seen her thump her tail. The little girl crouched down. She stayed a respectful distance from the pen. She held her small hand out through the mesh, palm up, the way she had clearly been taught. Sandy lifted her head. She sniffed the girl's palm, and then she got up, delicately, so as not to dislodge the puppies, walked to the mesh and pressed her forehead against the girl's palm through the wire. The girl looked up at her father. "Daddy," she said, "she's the one." The mother, her name, Brooke would learn, was Annika Delaney, put her hand on her husband's forearm. The husband, who was Jason Delaney, cleared his throat. "Doctor," he said, "we lost a dog last year, not this one. Ours was a golden. He was 14, it was time. We told the kids we'd get another one when we were ready. We weren't ready for a while. But my daughter, her name's Ivy, she saw that flyer at the diner and she said that dog needs us. And we told her we'd come look. That's all we promised. Just come look." "I understand. But that isn't just a dog to look at." "No, sir. It isn't. There are 3 puppies." "Yes." "Are they hers?" "They are. And they need to be placed?" "2 of them, yes. The little brown one. Reed. Reed is the reason his mother came to our door. She saved his life. He and his mother are a set. We are not going to separate them. But June and Piper," Brooke gestured at the smallest 2, "we've been looking for good homes for. Lily, our tech, is likely taking June. Piper is still looking. Annika Delaney and Jason Delaney and Ivy Delaney and the boy, his name was Owen, looked at one another. Brooke watched a family conversation happen without words. It was quick and it was complete. Annika turned to Brooke. "We'd like to take the mother and Reed," she said, "together. And Piper, if that's all right. If that's too many, we can talk about it. But we have a yard. We have the space. And I think," her voice broke, "I think we would love them very much." Marcus rested his hand on the doorframe as if he needed help staying up. Brooke said, "Let's talk paperwork." The paperwork took 3 hours. Brooke and Marcus insisted on doing a full home visit. Ana Delgado had drilled that into them, and Jason Delaney invited them out that Saturday. They drove out to a small blue house on a corner lot 2 miles north of the clinic. There was a large fenced yard with a fig tree in it. There was a mud room with a bench for dogs to sit on and be toweled off. There was, on a shelf in the family room, a framed photograph of a very old golden retriever asleep on a couch under a hand-crocheted afghan. Marcus, who was not a man given to whimsy, walked around the yard for 10 minutes without speaking, and then he came back to Brooke and said quietly, "This is the place." Brooke agreed. They approved the adoption. They set the pickup for the following Monday, once Reed had cleared his post-op check and Sandy had finished her course of antibiotics for a small tick-borne infection they'd caught on the second blood panel. Lily formally adopted June, whom she renamed Junebug. Piper went home with the Delaneys along with Sandy and Reed. On the morning of the pickup, Brooke stood at the front window with a cup of coffee in her hand and watched the burgundy minivan pull into the parking lot. It was not raining. It was a bright, dry morning with a smell of dry leaves in the air. Because it was now late in October, the whole thing had happened over the course of about a month. The Delaneys came into the reception area, and Ivy carried a small pink harness, and Owen carried a plush blanket with dogs printed on it, and Annika and Jason came in behind them with expressions that Brooke did not know how to describe. Brooke had brought Sandy and Reed and Piper out into the reception area on leashes. Sandy was wearing a new red collar that Brooke had bought her the weekend before, with a tag on it that had her name and Brooke's phone number on the back. Reed had grown enough over the past month that he no longer fit in one of Brooke's palms. Piper looked like a small white cloud with legs. Sandy looked at the Delaneys. She looked at Brooke. She thumped her tail twice, and then she walked slowly from Brooke's side to Annika's side, and she sat down at Annika's feet, and she looked back at Brooke as if to say, "This is right. You know it is." Brooke did know it. Annika crouched down and rested her hand on Sandy's head. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "Would you like to come home with us?" Sandy thumped her tail 3 times. Ivy knelt and buckled the pink harness onto Piper, who chewed on her hair. Owen picked up Reed, who fit exactly in the crook of his elbow, and held him against his chest like he was carrying an egg. Jason came over to Brooke and stuck out his hand, and Brooke shook it and did not trust her voice. "Dr. Fielding," Jason said, "thank you. Please, just call me Brooke." "Brooke, thank you. You take care of them." "We will." They walked out to the minivan. Brooke followed. She stood at the edge of the parking lot with her arms crossed against the October morning, and she watched the Delaney's load their new family into the back of the van. Sandy jumped up into the second row without hesitation. Reed was placed on the seat beside her. Piper was set in Ivy's lap. Annika turned to Brooke and mouthed the words, "Thank you," again through the closed window. The minivan pulled out onto Sanderson Road. It turned north. It disappeared around the bend by the coffee shop where the flyer was still up on the board. Brooke stood in the parking lot for a long time. She looked at the door of the clinic, at the mat where she had first seen the puppy, at the strip of gravel where Sandy had sat in the rain that Tuesday night 22 days before. She thought about Denise Halloran, who had lost a daughter and then a dog, and had not been able to keep either, but had come to Riverside with a photograph tucked into her coat and said, "So someone knows she was loved." She thought about Elliot Corwin, who had walked out of the clinic with a signed paper, and Marcus had heard through the grapevine, had sold his last 3 breeding females and turned his kennel into a used tractor lot within a month. She thought about the wire twist tie she had pulled out of a 6-week-old puppy's belly in the middle of a storm. Marcus came out to stand beside her. "Well," he said. "Well," she said. "You did a good thing, Brooke." "We did a good thing. I mean it. That night you did a good thing." She looked at him. She smiled, small and tired. "You would have done it too." "I don't know if I would have. I like to think so. But I don't know." They stood there in the October sun. A little wind moved the flyer on the community board across the street. The coffee shop was starting its noon rush. A truck went by with the windows down, playing a country song about somebody's hometown. Brooke thought about a dog she had never really owned, but had come to love. She thought about what that dog had known and how she had known it. She thought about the fact that trust, real trust, was not the absence of risk. It was the willingness to walk up a wet ramp in a storm and lay down what mattered to you at the door of a stranger, and then to sit down in the rain and believe the stranger would come out to help. Sandy had believed that. She had believed it hard enough to walk 30 miles for it. She had believed it hard enough to leave 2 of her pups in a shed with the tarp pulled over them and to come to a clinic with a lit window. She had believed it hard enough to sit down and watch through the glass without blinking, while a woman she had never met opened her puppy's belly and saved his life. Brooke went back inside. She wrote up the last of the discharge notes. She scanned Sandy's file into the system. She closed the file drawer. She stood at the reception desk for a moment, looking at the empty recovery pen through the glass door. And she felt the way a person feels when a room goes quiet after a party, grateful, exhausted, glad, and just a little bit lonelier. Then she walked over to the little corkboard behind the reception desk. On it, Marcus had pinned the photograph Denise Halloran had left them of Emily and Molly on the couch, and beside that, Lily had pinned a Polaroid of Sandy and Reed and June and Piper in a pile on the recovery room floor on the morning after they'd found the other 2 pups. Brooke reached into her drawer, pulled out a 3rd photograph, the one Annika Delaney had emailed her the night before, taken in the burgundy minivan when they had gotten Sandy and the puppies home, Sandy asleep on the back seat with Reed under her chin, and she pinned it up beside the other 2. 3 photographs, 3 chapters of a story that had begun with a scratch at the door on a rainy Tuesday night in September and had ended with a burgundy minivan on a dry, bright morning in October. Brooke looked at the pictures for another minute. Then she picked up her keys. The rain would come again. It always did in Ohio. And the next time a scratch came at the front door of Riverside Animal Clinic in the middle of a storm, Brooke Fielding would open it without hesitating and she would kneel on the wet cement, and she would trust whatever came in. Because a dog had taught her in one long, slow lesson that the door you can knock on is the door that saves you, and that no one, no person, and no animal should ever have to walk 30 miles in the rain alone before somebody turns on the light. If this story moved you the way it moved me while I was telling it, tell me about it down in the comments and let me know where you're listening from. I read every note, like the video so more people find it, and subscribe to the channel so the next story I share, whatever it is, finds you first. Take care of each other out there, and if you ever hear a scratch at the door in a storm, open it.